While Donald Trump was squatter of the United States, he tried to overthrow the election of 2020, first by fraud, then by inciting violence. But his efforts were defeated in great part because of the integrity and courage of the state-level Republican officials. Almost 7 months has now passed since his sycophantic inbreds of the squatter stormed Congress in an effort to coerce the vice squatter Mike Pence to declare Trump the winner of the 2020 election. In that time, the honest and brave state Republican officials have been reviled, condemned, and punished by their own party. The squatter was impeached, but most Republicans in the House voted against the impeachment, and most in the Senate voted to acquit. But Trump has otherwise, to date, escaped all consequences for his attempted destruction of the Constitution. He remains the Republican Party's best fundraiser, which is pathetic, and the clear frontrunner for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination. God damn, I said it's pathetic. And where they hold majorities in the state legislatures, Republicans are rewriting election laws to impose that new difficulties on black Americans and others whose voting they wish to discourage. And just in case that is not enough to deliver the outcomes that they want, they are concentrating all the new powers in party-controlled branches of state governments. Meanwhile, many in the conservative world are celebrating the January 6 attackers as victims of political persecution, which they're not. If not as outright heroes, which they weren't. The woman killed at the head of the charge to find and abduct Pence has been elevated as a martyr when it was her own fucking fault that she got killed. But put like that, it all sounds pretty bad. That's why a great deal of effort is being invested in never putting it like that, in finding some formula of euphemism, an excuse that normalizes Trump's attempt to keep the power despite electoral defeat. This campaign derides Trump's failed push as a shambles and a farce, an altercation, a protest gone wrong, a coup that was no coup at all. It amiably suggests that nobody need worry about the events of January 6th over much. To support this project, one must isolate the attack on Congress from the rest of the story of the 2019-2020 presidential election. Trump was impeached in 2020 for extorting Ukraine to deliver misinformation to help him against Joe Biden. He was impeached in 2021 for inciting an attack on Congress to stop Biden from taking office. But these were two separate crimes, but they emanated from the same scheme. And among that same scheme was not some solo lunacy of Trump alone. It's not Trump who is systematically ending the political careers of every Republican who has stood up for democracy over the past year. That's a broad effort that was almost universally supported in Trump's party. Nor is it Trump alone who is rewriting the election laws. Trump alone who is exonerating and celebrating the January 6 attackers. Trump alone who is shutting down any investigation of question about that day, such as who paid for the January 6 attackers to come to Washington in the first place. Those two are broad efforts almost universally supported in Trump's party. But the failed coup often looks ludicrous in the aftermath. Back in 1961, elements of the French militia had tried to overthrow the president of France, Charles de Gaulle, and then the new Fifth Republic. De Gaulle mocked the coup makers as basically he called them a handful of retired generals. The phrase is even more dismissive in French than it is in English. But de Gaulle was talking after the fact that after he knew the outcome, during the attempted seizure of power, he took it seriously enough. And so, should we take January 6th, the January 6th minimizers will argue that this is not the first violent protest on the Capitol grounds. Look back to 1954 when Puerto Rican terrorists opened fire on Congress back in 1954, wounding five of the members. The Weather Underground planted a bomb in a washroom beneath the Senate chamber in 1971, doing serious damage to the building. A communist group detonated a bomb in the Senate in 1983 to protest the U.S. invasion of Grenada. That one did less damage. But unlike all these other incidents, and unlike the Antifa attacks in the Portland courthouse or any of the other whatabouts favored by the Trumpists, the January 6th attack was unique in American history in one fateful and terrible way. It came from inside the government itself. That attack was not the work of avowed adversaries of the American government, of clandestine dissidents, of radicals outside the system. The January 6th attack was incited by the head of the American government, the man who had sworn to protect and defend that government. It was the first thing that was most feared by the authors of the U.S. Constitution, a betrayal of the highest office by the holder of that particular office. It's no mystery why pro-Trump partisans would excuse January 6th. Trump incited it. He continues to justify it. Of course, those sycophantic inbreds that are loyal to Trump would condone this latest outrage as they have previously condoned so many others. You sign with the mafia, you don't get squeamish about the crimes. But it's more fucking interesting to consider why so many non-Trumpy Republican partisans and conservative intellectuals are willing to expand so much effort minimizing and contextualizing January 6th. You might expect them to welcome the opportunity to draw a clean break. A sharp dividing line. Here at last is the toad, too ugly to swallow, and here's the long-awaited chance to shove Trump into the past and redirect their party to the post-Trump future. I think I could see 4 reasons why this won't happen. The first is the familiar human instinct to save face. You invest 5 years dismissing Trump as a vulgar but ultimately harmless buffoon. Then comes the definitive proof that you were wrong. Are you going to admit it? Of course not. You will use the mighty brain that the visible ferryman God gave you to explain why you were actually right all along, only in a slightly more complicated way than you were right before. Second reason is that non-Trumpy conservatards share with Trump conservatards an intense preoccupation with the hypocrisies and double standards of their political opponents. If anything, the non-Trumpy conservatards feel even more anger against those opponents than Trump conservatards did. Affirmatively, pro-Trump conservatards feel right at home in the Trump coalition, and for non-Trump conservatards, their situation is much less comfortable disregarding Trump himself as unimportant and irrelevant, which now he is, while focusing all their attention to irksome things done by anybody other than Trump becomes an indispensable psychological coping mechanism that leads them to reinterpret January 6th not as a story about Trump, but as a story about why Democrats did not say more in 2020 about urban disorders or some other irritant of the moment. Reason 3. The non-Trump conservatards have begun to absorb that Trump is not in fact receding into the past, but Trump's grip on the Republican Party remains tight. Unless he's dead or otherwise unable by then, hopefully he will be dead, he's the likeliest 2024 nominee, and even if he somehow is debarred from running, the noisy loyalty to Trump will be a precondition for anyone who wants to succeed him. The non-Trump conservatards can privately allow that January 6th was a blemish on Trump's record, but a defense of the record itself is the one and only meaningful test of loyalty in today's Republican Party. More meaningful than being anti-abortion rights or pro-guns, to say nothing of the economic or fiscal principles that the party jumped a long time ago. But finally, while non-Trump conservatards may disapprove of the crude and excessive violence that was deployed on January 6th, they do not disapprove of the post-democratic path that's being explored by the modern right. The yearning for a Caesar to repress the woke mob is expressed more and more explicitly, hence the appeal to even the highest toned of today's conservative intellectuals of Hungary's Viktor Orban, Poland's Law and Justice Party, and Russia's Vladimir Putin. Some even have favorable words for some of these fascists of the 1930s, such as Portugal's Antonio Salazar. The post-Trump right has a style as distinctive as its authoritarian substance, trolling, ironic, evasive. It expresses itself in its rhetorical questions, in their fake alternative reality, and sleights of phrase and mocking deflections. It does not openly declare its intentions, in part because it does not dare to, and in part because it itself does not yet fully know. Those of us who have walked away from this betrayal of our earlier beliefs can discern the resemblance to the fascism of the last century, but those heading toward the new destination do not see so clearly, distracted as they are by the wisecracks that they are trading as they trudge. Some things cannot be wisecracked anyway. January 6th was the last exit. If you can shrug it off as no big fucking deal, and just another fucking incident of Trump talking too fucking much, then you have already signed up for this next fucking incident, and the other fucking one piece of shit after that. And they are then offering a no-risk pair of options for the enemies of democracy. But trying to overthrow fucking democracy and win, then you win. Try and lose. Hey, you were only just fucking kidding. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King. And also hit the notification bell so that you can be notified when a new video comes out. And thanks for listening.